Hello, everyone. I'm Kari Vogelgesang, your host of the Educator Wellness Podcast, here to share and promote my life's work and passion, all things wellness, but not just any wellness. We're here to discuss wellness specifically as it pertains to educators. I am a former elementary school teacher, and I am passionate about helping educators see wellness in a very different way. This podcast is dedicated to educators across the globe, creating a space for us to come together in an authentic and therapeutic way, sharing our stories, our hopes, our joys, our fears, our sorrows, and hopefully creating some space to share some laughter with one another as well. In our journey to learn how to support one another to prioritize wellness and enhance our overall well-being. Please join me as we talk with nationally recognized experts to guide us on a transformative journey of self-discovery, helping us to embrace and weave all dimensions of wellness into the fabric of both our personal and professional lives. Also, please note that the opinions and perspectives that are shared on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the Scanlan Center for School Mental Health or the University of Iowa. Today, on the second episode of Season 2 of our Scanlan Center for School Mental Health Educator Wellness Podcast, we are joined by Dr. Allison Bruhn. She is the Executive Director of the Scanlan Center for School Mental Health, and she is also a Professor of Special Education in the College of Education at the University of Iowa. She likes to say that she's also a recovering middle school teacher. So she definitely knows what it's like to be working with students and navigating school systems. She's been working and studying. She's working in schools and studying challenging behaviors for pretty much her entire professional career. So she's joining us today to focus on the topic of challenging behaviors in K through 12 settings. As many of you who are tuning in know, because I think most of you who tune in are educators, but if you're a parent, if you are a community member who works with schools in your community in some way, shape, or form, you are probably quite aware there are overwhelming reports from K through 12 educators communicating that challenging classroom behaviors have increased in both frequency and intensity in the past few years. And trying to manage these challenging behaviors is now reported as one of the leading causes for teachers leaving the profession early anyway. And also, we are also seeing that this is being reported as one of the reasons why people don't want to enter the profession as well. So we are here to talk about what is going on with challenging behaviors. First of all, what does challenging behaviors even mean? Do we have an operational definition for that? Also, whose problem is this? Is this a parent issue? Is this a teacher issue? Is this a community problem? So let's get into it. Join us as we unpack all things challenging behaviors today with Dr. Allison Bruhn. Welcome, Allison Bruhn.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I am so excited actually just to sit down and have this discussion with you today. We have a long history together, and a lot of it is centered around challenging behaviors, which I think is really interesting. But studying challenging behaviors in K through 12 settings. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for taking time to come and talk to teachers, school administrators, paraeducators, everybody who is in our school system about challenging behaviors in our schools and what's going on with challenging behaviors in our schools, how this is impacting teachers, paraeducators, and families. It's a big topic, as you know, and I'm really looking forward to just unpacking it all with you.
I am too.
Well, I want to first start with kind of going back to what I was first talking about, which is just telling us a little bit about yourself. Like, what's your background? What's your history? What made you decide to focus your career and really dedicate a big portion of your life to studying challenging behaviors in school environments?
Sure. So I like to tell people that I'm a recovering middle school teacher. And I say that kind of lightheartedly, but also there's a little bit of truth to it.
Sure.
So I taught middle school science for a few years in a very poor rural area. And I mean, I was thrown to the wolves the very first year of teaching. I had seventh and eighth grade science. And my first year of teaching, I had this one class of 30 students. And I think 13 of them were on IEPs, and 12 of them at one point had been sent to the Alternative Learning Center for behavior issues at some point during the school year. And so that really sort of got me curious, but it was mostly out of survival mode, because I would go home every day, not every day, but a lot of days crying because I just felt like a failure in the classroom. And I knew that I was really good at instruction. I mean, that sounds kind of arrogant, but I felt confident in my ability to teach science. But it was dealing with the behaviors in the classroom that I just was not prepared for. And I also wasn't prepared for the number of kids with disabilities in my class, as well as just the trauma that a lot of these kids had. And so I think one of my strengths as an educator is building relationships. And so I really got to know some of my most challenging kids, and it just made me want to know more about how to help them. And so Kathleen Lane, who was a professor at Vanderbilt, and now she's at Kansas, was doing some research in my school on PBIS. And because I was a first-year teacher and super naive, I didn't know how to say no. And so I just yes, come into my classroom. Yes, I would be happy to serve on the PBIS team. Yes, I will be a tier 2 interventionist. So it was I was doing all of the social and behavioral stuff because I was interested. I also loved research, and I didn't know how much I loved research until I was a part of it as on the practitioner side. And sort of through those experiences and, being part of research and wanting to know more about how to better serve kids, I just decided to go back to school. And I went to Vanderbilt, got my PhD in special education with a focus on emotional and behavioral disorders. And so for the last however many years I've been here, been at Iowa since 2011. I focused my career on interventions and assessments for kids that struggle with behavior in the classroom, and also the teachers who serve them, because I think sometimes, I hate to say this because I'm very passionate about education and teaching, but a lot of times kid problems are a result of teacher problems. And so, and me included, I mean, I struggled because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were just saying about, because I felt the same way. I remember my first year of teaching in 2001, going all the way back to 2001. Can you believe that?
I know it's hard. Every time you start talking about dates, it's oh, no,
it's nuts. But but I agree with you. When I think back to my preparation, I felt like I was, in terms of content, academic content, really well prepared. But when you think, even at that time, I didn't take a class on behavior, not even one class.
Me neither.
You didn't either. Now we do have one class at Iowa,
and even that's rare. I mean, when you survey general education teachers and special ed teachers, it's usually special ed teachers who are the most likely to have any course in behavior intervention or classroom management.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about that just seems silly, right? Because, we have pushed really hard to provide, full inclusion, or as much inclusion as possible environments for students. So it doesn't matter what kind of teacher you are in a K through 12 setting, you are going to have students who have IEPs, who have 504s, who have challenging behaviors, who are going through the process of being identified for various things that are, hindering or possibly throwing wrenches in the wheel with learning and their academic and progress and social and emotional progress as well. So I know I kind of got somebody came up to me after Iowa Best actually and scolded me a little bit about coming down on teacher preparation programs. And I was like, listen, I'm faculty in a teacher preparation program. If anybody has a right to talk about the improvements we need to make on our end,
Yeah.
Like I do.
Make them. I mean, it starts with us.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that. And so, your comment actually really resonated with me. And it's not to demean faculty or teacher ed programs, but if we don't prepare teachers correctly, then we're just passing the buck to districts who then have to do professional development. And, they've got limited resources and limited time. So why are we waiting until people are already in the classroom to teach them things that they have to know on day one?
On day one, if not even before that, when they're prepping for those students to come into their classroom and starting to get to know them even before school starts, and building on the assets, the cultural assets that they're bringing into the classroom, so on and so forth. It needs to be, like you just said, even before day one. I totally agree. And the other point about that, I think that is really important to emphasize, is that until we can all come to the table and have honest conversations with each other about the parts that we all play in this issue that we're experiencing right now, and we can kind of get into that issue here a little bit more, we're never going to make progress. The first step is like really sitting down and being honest about what roles we're all playing in this, which leads to teachers leaving the field, which is the next step. The other thing that I wanted to bring up today, when we look at teacher surveys every week. I mean, I not only that, we give them every week. We look and see what kind of feedback our teachers that are interacting with us and engaging through the Scanlan Center with professional development, research, clinical services. We look at, the journals that we go to for different kinds of advice or whatever. We know that teachers are leaving the field in higher rates than ever before. And one of the biggest reasons that they list is challenging behaviors. Yes. They're not staying. And even when we start to talk to teachers, or even actually give them higher pay and higher salaries, they still say it's not worth it. I cannot come to school every day and feel like I'm the one who's getting bullied. And that's the way they feel.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's gotten worse.
Yeah, for sure. They've said, the data that we look at says that they at least are feeling like it has gotten worse, for sure. Some of that, of course, as you know, has to do with the fact that they are also under higher amounts of stress as well since COVID, with family situations, things that have happened during COVID that has increased their stress level and anxiety as well. All of this is to say, if you had to give us, some advice or a suggestion to a teacher who's entering the field right now, knowing that the risk of them leaving in the first 3 years is, we have a higher chance of them leaving in the first 3 years than we do them staying. So what would you say to them?
Read Harry Wong's First Days of School, or First Week of School. I mean, that was one thing that I really did get in my teacher preparation program, was the importance of that first week of school. And, if you don't set the expectations in the first week of school, you're always going to be playing catch up. And so I know it sounds so simple, but if you want to have a well-managed classroom where you don't feel beat up every day, you have to teach kids what are the expectations in your classroom. And I think that's probably why I so firmly believe in PBIS. And let me tell you what, when I was a teacher, I was a naysayer until I started doing the research and participating in the interventions. But when you teach kids what it means to be respectful in the classroom, and how that might look different in your classroom than it does in your home, and that's okay. It might look different in the community, but we're going to play the school game, for 7 hours out of the day. And you can have input from your students, but teach, model, practice, and reinforce. So that also means you have to pick your battles, right? You need to look for the good in kids, and every little thing that they are doing doesn't have to be an issue. And that was something I probably learned the hard way. I don't know what it is, maybe like super sensitive ears. I could not stand pencil tappers, right? Yes. And I'm one myself. Maybe it was like I was projecting, right? But that used to drive me crazy. And so I would get on to my kids about it, and it's like, my goodness, they're looking back, there are much bigger issues. So I guess I can't boil it down to one piece of advice, but teach expectations, praise the good, and pick your battles.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about, so for those of our audience members who don't know, what is PBIS? What does it stand for? What's the purpose? What's the principles? What is it?
Sure. So Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, PBIS, is a form of a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. We love acronyms in education. And it's really just a continuum of support. So tier 1 being the practices or instruction that everybody gets just by nature of showing up for school. Tier 2 being targeted supports for kids whom tier 1 is not working, but they're not super intense problems. Sure. So it might be some small group work. And then tier 3 being the most intense individualized level of intervention. And one thing that I think is sort of this misconception, I don't know if it's a misconception, it's more like lack of awareness, is that we often think about PBIS as the practices that are put in place. But I think what makes it so effective are the systems that support the practices. Yeah. So key to implementation is having ongoing professional development for teachers, technology, administrative support, those types of things within the system that allow educators to implement the practices. And then, of course, running throughout the system is data-based decision-making. So we're not just like making decisions based on how we feel in our heart or our gut. We're making them based on the data that we have.
Yeah, I think that's the key piece that a lot of people don't. You do such a good job when you're talking about PBIS and implementation of PBIS, of really hitting this idea home of system support. And I think that is the thing that most people don't quite understand or they're missing. Everybody has to be on the same page, and you're creating a system that's not only supporting students, but also supporting teachers, actually. And I think that's the piece that we just haven't done a super good job of talking through. I know you do. Like, I hear you. I've talked about it for years. So I get it. But yeah, I think, the system piece is just a really, really important piece when we're talking about schools. Okay, I want to just back up a little bit because we keep talking about challenging behaviors. Let's go back and try to come up with a definition, or maybe you can share a definition with us. When we say that in schools, what does that even mean? Do we have a shared definition?
I don't know that we do, and I think it's kind of evolved over time, particularly how we think about behavioral norms being kind of culturally situated. And so I think that makes us kind of step back a little bit about what is challenging behavior. But I think as a teacher, I would say challenging behavior is anything that is disruptive to classroom instruction, whether it's me providing the instruction or it's other students participating in the instruction. However, I think now being part of a mental health center, that has expanded how I view this a little bit. When I hear the word challenge, that's a struggle, right? So there are some kids who their challenge is classroom participation or social interactions or, things that produce anxiety, right? So kids who are withdrawn, they're not participating, they're feeling super anxious. Maybe they struggle with an eating disorder. I don't know. All the sort of internalizing things that are really difficult to see as a teacher. We're not trained to see. We're not mental health providers, and they don't capture your attention, but those are also challenging behaviors.
I so appreciate what you just said. And I hope so many people hear this. This is the piece for me that I think is really tricky and that we often, again, it's not talked enough about. We have students who are just not coming to school. And a lot of them are not, there's a wide variety of reasons why they're not coming, why they're not showing up. But one of them is exactly what you were just talking about, these internalized behaviors that are making it really challenging for them to even just show up, right? And obviously you can't learn much if you're not going to school. If you're missing 300 days of your high school life, which right now, when we look at some of the data, that isn't even all that unusual. 300 days. That is nuts, right?
That's crazy.
Or if they'll come, they just don't go to class.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that we're hearing from teachers is that they might even show up on campus, but they won't show up in my class. And I just, you just have to start to wonder, like, where is this going? Where are we heading with this? How can we really make schools a place where students really want to come and show up and be present and learn?
Yeah. I mean, and that belonging piece is so, so important. And I think over the last couple of years, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I've started to talk about it and look more into the research on belonging. And, there are lots of different factors that impact students' sense of belonging within a school. So individual factors, school level factors like extracurricular activities and the rules and the policies. But the biggest one is relationships with teachers.
Absolutely.
And so, and belonging has not only an impact on attendance, but then therefore their impact on their academic performance. And so teachers really have to put forth that effort to build relationships with students so that they feel that sense of belonging within their school and their classroom.
Yeah. And just getting to know your students and your families is the number one thing you can do to create that sense of belonging, for sure. The other thing that's interesting about this is teachers are reporting that their sense of belonging in school communities isn't there either. So that's really interesting, isn't it?
That is so sad. Well, it's interesting, like, when you have your own classroom, it's sort of isolating, right? You can stay put in those four walls. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that PLCs have become so popular, for a very long time, actually, because it gives you that professional learning community, right? But that sense of isolation can be really difficult.
Or lack of support from parents. I mean, I think that's another reason why they're starting to feel like maybe I don't belong here, because there does seem to be a more disconnect between our community / parents and our teachers. And, I think there's also lots of factors and reasons, not just one, that is contributing to this. It's really definitely heightened since COVID. But when you have that, you don't feel like you're part of a team. The parent, the child, the teacher can feel very isolating.
It's almost like you're fighting against everything, every system that exists, right?
Yeah.
The family systems, the school system, administration, and then just society when there's societal unrest.
Yeah.
Or COVID or whatever it may be.
Right.
And you're one person having to teach an entire classroom of students.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this at Iowa Best a lot too, right? Like we all play a piece in this, like parents, students, admin, teachers, paras, community organizations.
Yep.
Like, just how do we come to the table and really start to be honest about what is happening and how we're feeling and what we're missing, and how can we like reimagine what schools can be actually for our families, for our students, and for our teachers, if we just start to really have honest conversations.
It makes me wonder, the extent to which teachers have always felt like this.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I mean, school always felt like this big of a challenge.
Well, I think we both know that, there was lots of cracks in the foundation even before going into COVID. I think that it just, COVID blew everything up. There were other things that happened during that. We all know it wasn't just COVID. There was other things happening across the world that were very disruptive and concerning. And since we weren't all going to a job every day, it was in our face all the time. So yeah, I agree with that. Like I think we were ignoring it for a long time, not addressing it. And it's just, then COVID made it worse.
Well, and teaching is a lot, my daughter's first grade teacher said at a parent teacher conference once, she said, teaching is the best tired you will ever feel because you're helping kids. And on one hand, I was so inspired by that because I'm like, and she's an amazing teacher, right? So she's like, I don't care how tired I am, I'm helping kids. But then I also thought back to when I was a teacher and how exhausted I was. And I mean, I had a long drive to work every day and I had to be there at 7 a.m. School started at 7:20. And of course, I'm not showing up at 7. I had to be there earlier to get my class ready. And I would, almost doze off on the way home. And it is exhausting. I mean, you are on all day long. And so I keep thinking to Iowa Best and how exhausted we were for giving a presentation or 2 presentations in a day. And it's like, these heroes do it all day, every day. And I think people don't appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or it's maybe that they don't, it's not that they don't appreciate, they don't understand.
They don't understand. I think it's until you do that job. It's just like any job. You cannot fully understand it. The other thing that's happening with technology is that I know teachers feel like, and even some of the courses that I teach in higher ed or have taught in recent past, you have to be so unbelievably careful with your words. And I'm not saying language isn't important. It is absolutely important. Oh. And we have to think through how we say things, how we present things, consider who's in the class. I mean, we have to consider all aspects, and to create the sense of belonging. And just that piece alone, constantly thinking through every single word that comes out of your mouth and how that is going to impact the people in that classroom environment is exhausting.
And you do it all day, every day.
All day. Yeah. Yeah. They're impressionable minds. You don't want to mess up. We're not intentionally messing up.
Exactly.
Like it's just, but it's
and you may have a student in your class filming you.
That's just it.
And I mean, it's in addition to all of the other pressures to, with standardized testing and, making sure your students are meeting, making adequate yearly progress.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is that we can all come together and be teammates. That, I did feel I was lucky that there was one year that I had a really rough year with some admin, but not just me, our whole building did, but I did feel like I was part of a team. And we go back to like our sports background. I love that feeling. Like when we're on the same team.
Yeah.
We're watching out for each other. We're
same goals.
But it does feel like more and more teachers are reporting they don't feel like they're part of that team. And like you said, that has to, right, like directly impact some of how our students are behaving in our schools.
That's so interesting. It immediately made me think of my work with a local high school here and how we built their PBIS system from the ground up. And it started with a small team of educators. But when we trained and we built that system, everybody was involved. It was the entire school. And I think that was so pivotal in ensuring that everybody had a voice and everybody was on the same page. And, we co-constructed their school-wide expectations. And it looked a little different than other schools had done in the past. And that's fine. I mean, they designed it. And, the administrators were in the arena. They were at every single professional development. They were participating. School counselors were involved. I mean, I'm so proud of that work. Not proud of me, proud of them. Because they did it. And it was everybody coming to the table.
Yeah. That's such a key piece too. Whenever, I'm in schools every week doing PD. And as soon as I get started and I see administrators leave, huge red flag for me.
Yeah. Because, we know that they're busy. We're all busy, but it also signifies this isn't a priority. And so that's what, shout out to, can I say their names on here? Scott Gibby and Justin Colbert, because they were there. They were leading and participating and asking questions and engaged in discussion with their staff. And they were making time.
Well, and that's how you build relationships. Like when you start to listen to what teachers have to say in those professional development moments and what their concerns are, what their challenges are going to be with implementation, on and on and on, that's when you learn, right? Like what's really going on in my community that I'm ultimately the leader of. So yeah, and I get it too. I understand, we both are in admin positions now and it's not easy work. It's not. I'm not sure you could pay me enough to be a K-12 school administrator right now.
Well, that's another thing we don't talk about. It's not just teachers that are burnout. Administrators are burnout. And I said during COVID, I was like, I would not want to be in administration at any institution, any level. right? Whether it was the department chair, a dean, a principal, a superintendent, because they were making really, really tough decisions at just a completely tumultuous time.
Yeah.
And nobody knew what was going on. And no matter what decision you made, there were going to be critics. And that's the case always, but it was heightened during COVID.
High stakes. Yeah, for sure. And there was like so much politics involved in it. And it was, I agree with you. I kept saying the same thing. I mean, I just thought to myself, this is an impossible situation to be in. Yeah. Okay. Well, we covered a lot of bases. You should be like a reoccurring guest.
I'm a football coach. That's what covered a lot of bases. Ha ha ha.
Maybe we'll incorporate softball every time you're on.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I know you used to actually. I don't remember what you were teaching, but I'm trying to remember now. You would go through like the pitching.
Backwards chaining.
That's what it was. Yeah. It was a good analogy.
That's a real behavioral term for those of you that are listening. You can look it up.
Yeah. That's your homework.
Backwards chaining.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So part of this podcast is really thinking through like self-care for educators as well. Those of you who know me, I actually don't like the term self-care because it's so loaded and, it makes people think of things that aren't self-care. But one of the things that I want to go through with you at the very end here to connect to, especially our younger educators that are just entering the profession. If you could have a conversation with yourself as an early career educator, the first 1 or 2 years, what would you say to yourself?
Run. No. I'm just kidding. Oh my God, no, I'm just kidding. Like, we need really good educators.
We do.
And so if you are in it for the right reasons, please stay or join a college of ed. Enroll now. Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I go back to pick your battles. I think that's really, really important. But in sort of this idea of self-care, it's okay to take a break. We have sick days and those can be mental health days. Now, every educator knows that taking a day off can sometimes be a bigger pain in the butt than just showing up because you have to do sub plans. But maybe plan those mental health days ahead of time. But it's okay to say, you know what, I am really struggling. Things are tough in my classroom right now, and I just need time to like decompress. I need time away and then take that time because, like when you take a break, like you're so much more rejuvenated coming back. And that was a hard thing, I think, for me to learn. I mean, especially my first year, and you don't have that many days. So you just show up sick even when you shouldn't. But besides, taking that mental health day, I really do think, picking your battles and then also look for the good. So one of the things that I talk a lot about in presentations is this book called Love Does by Bob Goff. And he tells this story of when he was going through sort of like this midlife crisis. And he decides that he's going to buy, I think, a yellow or red Volkswagen Beetle. Like that's what he's going to do. Like he turned 50 and that's what he wants. And so as soon as he makes this decision, what happens? Whenever he drives, he sees that car, right? And you think about that like in your own life. When you get a new car or a new pair of shoes, all of a sudden you notice them everywhere else, right? You see what you look for. And so in the classroom, if you want to see bad behaviors, you will see them. They're not hard to spot. What's harder is to spot the good. And so you really have to look for the good in people. Probably more importantly, in your kids who struggle the most, whether it's a kid with a disability, a kid who's experienced trauma, a kid who is driving you crazy and you wish they were on the absent list, like look for the good and then acknowledge that good in that kid because that will build relationships.
I think that's a great place, to leave it because it's so true. Our minds can really play tricks on us sometimes. We just have to make sure that we're constantly remembering and reminding ourselves why we're in it how to take care of ourselves and to look for those good moments in our students and our colleagues, because everybody is really struggling and just trying to do their very best. So, well, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Until next time.
All right.
I always really enjoy and appreciate having a moment just here and there to sit down with Dr. Allison Bruhn to discuss anything education, but particularly discuss challenging behaviors in classrooms and working with teachers on how to set up their classroom and how to avoid experiencing challenging behaviors in a classroom setting. So I first want to just really state how appreciative I am that we were able to catch Allison and get her on our podcast to discuss this really important issue right now that teachers are experiencing, parents are experiencing, or admin are dealing with. And I guess one of my biggest takeaways in this conversation really connects to and leads me back to one of my takeaways in the first episode, which is schools are really a reflection of what's happening in our communities. Oftentimes the things that we are experiencing in schools and the challenges that we're experiencing in schools are really things that our community or our larger communities are having issues with as well. And it just leads me back to this fact that until we can start to really address challenges that we're experiencing in schools and that teachers are experiencing and parents are experiencing with their children in schools, and address these on a much larger scale in a context of a larger community, I'm not sure how much progress we're going to make. I think we keep kind of trying to tackle problems that we have in our education system in a way that just really focuses on this is a school problem. And I don't think that that's getting us anywhere. I think we talked a little bit about that today in our episode, but then also hopefully gave you some pointers and some suggestions for how to address these issues more immediately. But I do think that we have to think through this question that I just keep coming back to, which is, how do we start to work together to advocate together, even across differences, but maybe even especially across differences, for conditions that allow us to thrive as opposed to just survive? I would love to hear from all of you. You can share your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions with me and with the rest of our audience at scsmh-maine@uiowa.edu. You can send in your questions. We also invite you to send in different topics that you're interested in hearing more about, or even guests that you would like to see on the podcast. Please feel free to share. We love to hear from you. But until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Kari Vogelgesang, forever cheering you on. Goodbye, everyone.